Alrighty, Chapter 7, Balancing Nationalism and Sectionalism. Alright, so the main idea, the North and South, meaning America, developed different economic systems that led to political differences between the regions. Now, why does this matter now? Different regions of a country continue to have different political and economic interests today. So in 1801, in a dramatic presentation in front of President John Adams, Eli Whitney demonstrated the first musket made interchangeable parts. Um, and these parts were exactly alike. And he assembled a musket from pieces chosen at random from crates full of parts. Now, Whitney had his musket parts made in the old fashioned way by hand, but still this is the first time that interchangeable parts were made on anything. So this is going to change the way we see the world today and how things are manufactured. Better tools sped up the manufacture of goods and improved the reliability. Inventions and ideas such as these would affect different regions of the young nation in different ways. And in 1798, Eli Whitney manufactured 10,000 muskets in just 2 years. And at that time, arms factories, which are guns or weapons, could produce only 300 guns a year. All right, so during the 19th century, new approaches to manufacturing, such as Whitney's interchangeable parts, took industry out of American households and artisan workshops. Factories became the new centers of industry. The factory system, using power-driven machinery and laborers assigned to different tasks, made mass production, the production of goods in large quantities possible. These changes in manufacturing brought about an industrial revolution. This is going to be social and economic reorganization that took place as machines replaced hands and tools and large-scale factories productions was developed. All right, so the Industrial Revolution began in Great Britain. It began in Great Britain. That's across the ocean. It was in Britain during the 18th century that inventors came up with ways to generate power using swiftly flowing streams. So they could supply coal. Inventors then developed power driven machinery and ways to use this machinery quickly mass produce goods such as textiles. British merchants built the first factories. When these factories prospered, other owners had money to build more factories, invent more labor saving machines, and industrialize the nation. All right, so here's a picture of Great Britain during the Industrial Revolution. You can see a bunch of factories and smoke and steam and people working hard. All right, so the Industrial Revolution in the United States. The primary source of income in America after the War of Independence, which was the Revolutionary War, was international trade, meaning you would trade with other countries, not manufacturing, so not making goods at home. Farms and plantations produced agriculture, which is like food, such as grain and tobacco, which were shipped to Great Britain. So we were making a bunch of stuff and we were sending it over to Great Britain. Also to Southern Europe and the West Indies, which is like the Caribbean. Okay, so however, two events. The passage of President Thomas Jefferson's Embargo Act of 1807 and the War of 1812 turned the attention of Americans towards the development of domestic industries. Jefferson's embargo, which prohibited Americans from shipping goods to Europe, brought a standstill to the once thriving foreign trade. So this is going to stop our foreign trade. In fact, by the time Congress repealed the act in 1809, many shipping centers, especially those in New England, which is above New Jersey, had shut down. And so, right when these seaports were starting to recover, the War of 1812 broke out, and the British Navy blockaded, meaning they blocked the port with ships, so there could be no trade going in and out. They blockaded much of the coastline of America, and ships were unable to get into or out of port of the U.S. harbors. So they had to invest their capital, meaning their money, um, in other things besides overseas shipping. So Americans had to figure out a way to invest their money on the home front, not relying on trade from other countries coming in and out. All right, so in 1793, um, the textile factory was going to be invented, but it only had one part that was ran by machines. And textiles means finished cloth or thread. And by 1813, you're going to have the whole factory being run by machines. And by 1822, you're going to have a bunch of people moving away from the farms to come to work in these factories. And these were going to be mostly young women. So here's a picture of the factories that I'm talking about, the textile factories. So you would have a canal or a stream or a river that would power the factory and these machines, and then you would have the women working in here with the machines to create the cloth to put it on a wagon that the horses would take away. So here's another picture of the steam engine. Looks really safe to work on. All right, so cash crops didn't grow well in the north because of the soil and the climate, but in the south, however, uh, they were making huge profits from cotton by the 1790s. So you would have, in the south, you would have people getting the cotton from the farms and sending it up north to those factories. So Eli Whitney's invention of the cotton gin um, in 1793 helped set the South on a different course of development from the North. This is going to be huge. Cotton was easier to grow, but it was harder to clean. So the cotton gin would separate the seeds from the cotton. So this invention was going to up the production of cotton. And when you're upping the production of cotton, what do you need in the South? You're going to need more slaves to separate the seeds from the cotton and pick the cotton. So the cotton gin accelerated the expansion of slavery, but when Eli Whitney invented this, he thought it was going, he invented this because he wanted to stop slavery. He wanted to slow down the slave trade, but in reality, all it did was accelerate it. So you can see in 1800, cotton exports were pretty low at 7.1%, and by 1860, 60 years later, our number one export in America is cotton, with 57.5% of all American exports. So by 1808, slave traders had brought 250,000 additional Africans to the United States as slaves. Now, this many slaves had been brought to the mainland of America from 1619 to 1776. That's a huge amount of people, just because of this invention that was made, the cotton gin. So you're going to see a lot more slaves come to America after the cotton gin was invented. So here's some slaves on a plantation picking the cotton. They would take that cotton, put it in the cotton gin, um, remove the seeds from the cotton, and then they would take that cotton and ship it up to the north, where they would put it in these factories and make textiles from it. So blankets, shirts, and pants. So here's the south down here, and then you would have the north, which is the purple area, and I guess the green area too. So as the North and the South developed different economies, the creation of a plan to unify the nation became increasingly more important. And in 1815, President Madison represented such a plan in Congress. And he hoped this agenda would both unite the different regions of the country and create a strong, stable economy that would make the nation self-sufficient. So his plan included three major points. Developing transportation systems, establishing tariffs, which would, that's tariffs on imports and exports. When you import something from a different country or export something, you have to pay a tariff, which is a tax, if you will. And the resurrection of a national bank. All right, so the plan held promise. Recognizing this, even former critics of the president, Henry Clay and John C. Calhoun, rallied behind it. The House Speaker, Henry Clay, began to promote this as the American system. And so as Clay explained it, the American system would unite the nation's economic interests. An increasingly industrial North would produce the manufactured goods that farmers in the South and the West would buy. Meanwhile, predominantly agricultural South and the West would produce most of the grain, meat, cotton needed in the North. So like I explained, in the South, you would have farms that would raise cattle, and they would create food like corn and grain, and they would ship it up north, where they would take those products and make them into something, into the factories. So you got farms in the South, or plantations, and up north you would have the factories that would package these products or make them into something. So let's review some of the questions that I'm going to ask you at the end here. Number one, who demonstrated the first musket made of interchangeable parts? Let's see, interchangeable parts. That would be Eli Whitney. Eli Whitney. Number one is Eli Whitney. Number two, what is the production of goods in large quantities? This was mass production. And where did the Industrial Revolution begin? Let's see here. Where did it begin? Great Britain. Great Britain. Which crop reaped huge profits in the mid 1790s in the South? Was it rice or was it cotton? Definitely cotton. And who invented the cotton gin? Eli Whitney. Our boy, Eli Whitney. There he is. So he is going to be the first one to invent interchangeable parts. If you pretty much look at anything that we own today, I'm sure it has interchangeable parts connected to it. All right, so that's a review. We're almost done, so bear with me. Slide 60. All right, so for people in different regions to do business with one another and for the economy to grow, they had to commute, travel, or transport goods. And the first steam locomotive in the United States was built in 25. Railroads offered several advantages over existing modes of transportation. They were fast, they were able to cross a lot of terrain, and they were also possible to operate in severe weather. And there's your first steam locomotive. There's your trains. You're also going to have canals built. Canals are waterway systems that connect one large body of water, like the Atlantic Ocean, to a river or a lake. So here's the Erie Canal that connects to the Hudson River, which the Hudson River flows down to New York City and into the Atlantic Ocean. So you can go from the Atlantic Ocean up the Hudson River over to the Erie Canal and to the Great Lakes. So the Great Lakes are connected to the ocean, essentially. So here's a picture of the Erie Canal and them digging it. I'm sure mad humans died creating this thing. Oh, so here's a better picture. So you got the Atlantic Ocean. Here's us in New Jersey, up in Piscataway. You got New York City here. You can have a little boat here in the Atlantic Ocean, travel up the Hudson River, over the Erie Canal into the Great Lakes, if you wanted to. I'm sure it would take a long time. So here's some major roads, canals, and railroads by 1840. All those red, yellow, blue lines. All right, so in 1816, as the country was developing, a new president's going to be elected, and his name is going to be James Monroe of Virginia, and he's going to be elected as president.